Okay, so let's start with a few simple rules, and then I'm going to explain the rules, and then we're going to use examples to demonstrate those. Okay, so slide show from current slides. Okay, so let me. Can you? I don't know what happened here because I have a second computer, second screen, so it shows. So can you see my screen clearly? Yes or no? I don't know why it's showing two screens. Yes. Okay, so I'm going to move on to previous slide. There's one more slide before that. Or actually, there's one more. Okay, so let's see what before that there's nothing. Okay, so this is entity relationship, partial entity relationship diagram. So we did that in lab. I did that in lab, so I do not have a complete picture, but I have major things here. So we have a student to check out book copies, and then there's a book title. The relationship between book and a book copy is like a weak entity here. So book copy is a weak entity of a book, in the sense that if a book, for example, book title is deleted, then you should not have copies record in your database. So book copy depends on the book title to exist. That's why this is called weak entity. All right, so now let's see how we're going to do conversion. So basically, the first rule is very common, is pretty common sense. Okay. If you have questions, just ask. Just turn on your microphone to ask. I can't see the text when I do screen sharing. Okay, just turn on your microphone to ask. I think Mike was trying to ask some question. Mike?
No, I was just confirming that you were recording the lecture.
Yeah, I did. I'm recording. All right. Okay, so first rule is common sense. Basically, just each box in the entity relationship diagram, you're going to convert. You're going to change it, make it like a table. Make sense? And then you have list attributes, right, in the box, and those attributes will become columns of the table. So that's pretty easy to understand. And then among those attributes, some of them will be IDs. So you will make those IDs as a part of a primary key. So basically, you may have one or more columns, which may be identifying, but you make those as a single primary key column or multiple primary key column, make them as like composite key. So basically that so identifying attributes become primary keys. And then you also make sure that some attributes are required, some attributes are optional. So what does that mean? So you will make those columns as required and optional. Here, required just means that those columns must have a value, okay, cannot have missing values. Optional, in other words, can have missing values. Does it make sense? So for example, if I require that every student name must be required, that means, when you create a student record, the student name must be there. You cannot create a record without the student name. On the other hand, if you make a major as optional, that means a student may have no major when you create the record. All right, so this optional required just means that it does not mean that attributes, the column can be missing. Okay, only the values can be optional or required. Okay, so the first rule is pretty common sense, right? And does everybody agree? So each box become a table, columns, attributes become columns. Then second part is a little bit more involved. So that's require that is talking about how we are going to convert the relationships. So relationships are converted. Depends on how the relationships are quantified. For one-to-many relationships, you will duplicate the primary key from the one-sided table into many-sided table. So for example, between customer and autos, right? So customer side is one and auto side is many. So you're going to duplicate the primary key of customers table into orders table. That's what I mean by duplicating primary key from one side table into many side. Make sense? Now, what if you have a many-to-many? So if you have a many-to-many relationship, then you're going to duplicate the primary key of both tables into a third table, which is called junction table or middle table. So just arbitrarily create a junction, create a new table. So in that, you're going to duplicate the primary key from original two tables into that table. So for example, between customers and accounts in the bank situation, one customer can have many accounts and one account may have many customers, right? Many owners. So you have a many-to-many relationship. So in that case, you're going to create a junction table, like a middle table, and then you duplicate primary key from accounts into that, and also from customers into that. Does it make sense? Okay. And then next rule is, what if you have one-to-one relationship? If you have one-to-one relationship, you duplicate the primary key of any side to the other side, and not both. Okay, so for example, let's say you have relationship between president and schools, between president and school. Each school has one president, right? And each president serves one school. Each school has one president, so that's a one-to-one relationship. So in that case, you can duplicate primary key from president's table into school. Or oppositely, you can just do primary key of schools into president. But you just do one, you don't do both. Make sense? Okay. And then, so this is about the mapping. How do you handle relationship that really, basically depends on how you duplicate primary keys. And I mentioned that in the very first class. So whether how you duplicate the primary key into a foreign key, it really depends on this mapping cardinalities. Okay, depends on whether it's one-to-many or many-to-many and one-to-one. So for these rules, you probably need to just internalize that. Okay, so one-to-many duplicated from one-to-many side. Okay, and if it's a many-to-many, then you duplicate the primary key into the junction table. If one-to-one, just do either way. All right. And then finally, what about those foreign key columns? Will they be required? Will they be required to have values, or can they be optional? And that really depends on the nature of the relationships. Nature of relationship. So relationship, for example, if it's a one-to-many or one-to-one, then you will look at the receiving side of the foreign key, and say whether that side in the relationship is required or optional. If it's required, then the foreign key is required. If it's optional, then the foreign key is optional. But the foreign keys in the junction table, like in many-to-many situation, junction table, then all foreign keys will be required. So they cannot have missing values. Now let me show you an example for that, okay? So here, customer and order, right? So you're going to duplicate primary key from customers table into order table, right? So in that case, order table is going to be receiving side of the foreign key. So order is going to receive a foreign key. So look at here. This. Can you see my mouse moving? Here. So that means this is solid. This relationship is solid. So that means the foreign key must be required. For another example, so between payment and order. So one payment, order may or not have payment. So let's assume that I'm going to duplicate this one-to-one relationship. I'm going to duplicate primary key from payment into orders. So then order is going to receive the foreign key. And now look at the receiving side. The receiving side is dashed. See that? So in that case, the payment ID duplicated inside orders table is going to be optional. Can have missing values. And if we do it the other way, let's say if I'm going to duplicate primary key from orders into the payments, so order ID into the payment table, then payments become receiving side of the foreign key, and then the payment, look at here, that is solid. This side is solid, right? Payment side. So that means that foreign key, when you get into payment, must have a value. So it's going to be required. Does it make sense? Okay, so now if there's no let me say whether you have any questions. If you have no questions, I am going to use this example and then one more, maybe two other examples. Let me say how many examples do we have in this PowerPoint. I'm going to follow this PowerPoint. Let's go to.
I'm sorry, I had a question.
Yeah.
Could you repeat the reasoning for which one gets the foreign key between customer and order?
Between customer and order is one to many, right? So you're going to duplicate primary key from one side into many side. Does it make sense? That's the rule.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Unlike an order and a payment, that's one to one, so you can do either way. Okay. And then between order and the product is many to many, then you're going to create a junction table in the middle. Okay.
So when you say order and payment as one-to-one, you mean like an order has to have a payment and a payment has to have an order, right? You
have to just do one. You don't have to do both. You
Okay.
You can just have, say, inside orders table you can have a payment ID, or you can inside the payment table you can have order ID, but not both. Get it?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So now let me exclude what is it? Exit the presentation. So I will do this example, the library example. The library example have like a weak entities here. Let me see whether I have any other diagrams. There's another diagram here. So let's say if we have a time, we can do that too. So that would be enough for three. We will do for three examples we're going to do. Okay. Okay. So I saw one person came late. You need to check attendance. The password is engineering. Engineering is password. All right. So now I am going to use whiteboard to draw tables. So for your homework questions, I think one of your homework questions was to convert ERDs into relational model, right? So just follow me. What are you going to do? Like what we do in the class in this example. So we do not have we can use data modeler to automatically do the transformation, but our exercise here is trying to internalize those rules, understand why we do this. Okay, so we are going to do that. Just use a pen and pencil. All right, so I'm going to switch to whiteboard to do that. Okay, so now let me switch to whiteboard. And first of all, for this PowerPoint, let's see. For this PowerPoint, I'm going to put it to the other screen too. So that way we can come back and reference to that. So I'm going to do the banking example first. I will put it here, or maybe here, doesn't matter. Okay. And then I'm going to open up the whiteboard. So whiteboard should be in this screen. So I will create a blank whiteboard. Okay. So make more this a little bit. Oh. All right, so let's just use this whiteboard and then we'll go back and forth to reference to that. So let's do the banking example first, because that one is very simple. Just basically have no weak entities or anything. So first of all, I'm going to create one table for each box. Okay, so the table include cost. Can you see this ERDs? If not, you can just open up your own PowerPoint. Okay. Customers, account, transactions, and employee. So we'll do that. Well, no, I think I will do the other one first. I will do the last one. So I will come back to this one if we have time. So let's do this one first. So this is customer, order, products, and the payment because it has everything we need. Okay. So first of all, we're going to, so let's say this is customer, customer order relation example. Okay. So first of all, I create tables, customer table, customers, and the customers. By the way, when we naming things, there's this is industry convention. When you draw ER diagrams, make sure every name is singular name, singular noun. But then when you create tables, create relational models, every table should be plural name, plural term, plural nouns. Okay, so customer, customers, payment, payments. Okay, now for customers, what do we have? We have just customer ID, last name, first name, birth date, and the income. Okay, so we will do customer ID, last name, first name, and birth date, B date, and the income. Okay, so that's very very easy to understand. It's straightforward, right? Where is my mouse? Okay, here. All right, so we have customer. So now look at the attributes. Customer ID is like ID, and then last name, except first name is required, everything else is optional. So now let's mark that, okay? So for customer ID, I'm going to mark that as a primary key. So how am I going to mark? I'm going to just underline that, okay? So that indicate that is a primary key or part of a primary key, okay? And whether it's a primary key or not depends on whether there's a weak entity or not. So we'll decide that later. And then first name is required, so I will put a little star on top of that, okay? And for everything else, there's optional, 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 okay? So those attributes, those columns can have missing values. That's what it means. All right, so that is the first one. Now let's do order. Order have order ID, order date, and order amount. Okay, so I'm going to have orders here, which has OID, order date, and order amount. Okay, and then OID is UID, so we underline that as part of a primary key. And order date is required, and order amount is optional. Okay. Now let's do a third box. Third one is a product. Product has only two columns here, SKU and the description. So products. SKU and the description. Okay, so SKU is UID, so we underline that as part of primary key, and optional, and then the description is optional, so just mark that as optional. Okay. All right. And finally, we have payments. So let's do that. Payments. So what are in the payments? What attributes? Have a payment ID, payment date, and amount. Payment ID and the payment date and the payment amount. Okay, so we will mark identifying PIDs, identifying, so that is become part of primary key. And amount is optional, this is required. Okay, so what we have done so far, just make every box as a table, column attributes become columns, and also convert the corresponding marks of each attributes into either identifying, optional, or required. Okay, so this part is pretty simple, right? There's nothing really need to memorize. It's just pretty common sense. And the next part, I will handle relationships and the relationships. So for that, if you have a complicated ER diagrams, you probably want to use a pen and pencil in the printout. Use a pen and pencil to cross each relationship if you're already done. Okay, because you may have a very complicated ER diagrams, then you may forget which one you have done, which one you have not. All right, so I'm going to just say, since we have only 3 here, so it's pretty easy. Let's do the first one first. First one is one-to-many. For one-to-many between customers and orders, so therefore I'm going to duplicate the primary key of customer ID into the orders. So I'm going to create extra column in the orders, and then we make that as customer ID duplicated, and that we can circle that, indicate that's the foreign key, and we can even connect that with the corresponding primary key, just indicating that that is from where the primary key was duplicated from. Okay, so this is CID duplicated from this CID. Okay, so basically the value in this column, in this foreign key column, is going to be some of the values of this customer primary key column, customer IDs. All right. However, this foreign key name can be different. You don't have to use CID. For example, you can change this to customer, or change it to customer number, or change it to something else, which make more sense in the current table. So just imagine you have a lot of tables, and then you may have, something, maybe this, when you look at the orders table, the CID may not make sense, but if you put a customer in there, it will make more sense. So you can change foreign key names, but the data for the column is going to be same as this customer ID. All right. So what about this? Whether this customer ID is required or not? So now for that, we are going to look at here. Look at the receiving side. The receiving side is auto, so that is solid. So therefore, the foreign key is going to be required. So that means we are going to put star here. Star. Okay. So that means that column, for each auto, you must have a customer ID. For each auto record, you must have a customer ID in that row, in the record.
Wait, I'm sorry. What indicated that it was required?
So the customer ID is a foreign key here. So the foreign key, according to the third rule, the receiving side, if you look at the receiving side here, so if you look at the receiving side cardinality, this is one-to-many, right? This optional side, this dashed, and this solid line. You see that? The solid line means this means that each order must have a customer. So therefore, when you have a foreign key, the foreign key must be required. Okay, it's a star. So star here just means that this column must have a customer. So you cannot have orders without a customer ID, in other words. Okay, customer ID column cannot be missing. Got it? All right, so now let's do many-to-many here. So between order and the products, we have a many-to-many. So between orders and the products, we have a many-to-many. So therefore, I'm going to create a junction table. Somewhere, does not matter, anywhere. Okay, so in the junction table, I'm going to duplicate primary key from both orders and the products into it. So I'm going to duplicate order ID as one foreign key, and SKU as another foreign key. Okay, so duplicate primary key from both ends into the middle table. And then for junction table, all foreign keys will be required, so you have to mark them as star. All right. Now, what about the name of this table? For this name of table, if you can find some kind of descriptive name, it will be okay. If you cannot, then you will just use some kind of abbreviation of original tables like auto product, something like that. So I can name that as ORD, PROD, something like that. Okay. But in this case, I think we can make intuitive names. So this is basically just like a line item, right? Order lines. So we can just say this is order lines. So this table is representing order lines. Okay. Now, what about the primary key for this table? Every table must have one primary key. Okay. So what is the primary key for this table? Well, for that, you have two choices. You can make up like artificial key somewhere. So maybe like creating something like this, say order line ID. Okay, create that. That is one possible choice. Another possible choice, actually, is more common choice, is just simply use these two foreign keys as one composite primary key. So you can underline this one. So let's just underline here, okay? So underline here and here. So underline both. Let me just try to make them look same. So remember, originally we have OID, so that's required. SKU, that was required. This was originally foreign keys, right? So now I underline both. So that indicates that this order lines is going to have a composite primary key consisting of two columns. Make sense?
I'm sorry, what required us to make the junction table again?
The foreign keys in the junction tables are all required. They cannot have missing values.
Well, why did we have to make the junction table in the first place?
Why do we have to make a junction table in the first place? Very good question, because that's how we can connect. We will be able to connect products with orders because they have a many-to-many relationship. Okay, remember in the relational model, we cannot use pointers, all right? But we do want to be able to navigate from orders to products. So for example, if I have orders, if I have an order or what order record, I want to find out what products I have ordered, right? If I have product record, I want to find out which order contains that products. Make sense? So because of that, we need to create a junction table as a way to duplicating the key values so that we can navigate from one table to another table, from one record to another record. Okay.
Thank you.
We talk about that in the first day of class. In the relational model, we do not use pointers. Then how can you navigate from record to record? Okay, so what we are talking about is that just say if it's one to many, then you duplicate primary key from one table into many table, from one side table to many side table. If it's a many to many, you create a junction table in the middle. Okay. All right. So next, we have one more relationship. That's a one-to-one relationship between orders and the payment. So what we do is I am going to duplicate. We can do either way. All right. So we can, for example, duplicate primary key from payments into orders or from orders into payment. So now let's say if I do order to payment, then what we do is I'm going to just create extra column inside the payment table, and that is order table's primary key, which is the order ID. Okay, so that indicate that is foreign key duplicated, and that if you look at the relationship is basically, this was duplicated into here, and this was duplicated into here, but now this is also duplicated into here, right? So
why do we need two of the duplications?
Why do we need it?
Yeah, what's the point of it being duplicated into payments if it's like in the junction table already?
Oh, the junction table does not have the relationship between orders and the payments. So now we're talking about here. So suppose you have a payment record. How can you find out which order the payment is for?
Okay, I got it.
Okay, the junction table just say junction table was basically say which order contains which products. Got it?
Yeah.
Okay. So here we do need here we need to connect. So basically in the original table we have relationship between payments and orders. So now we convert that relationship. All right. So we will duplicate primary key of orders into the payments, And is that required? Yes. Look at the solid line here. If you look at the payment side, that's solid, right? Relationship. So therefore, this foreign key will be required. Make sense? This is the one way. What if we do other way? Now, if we do other way, then let me just delete this, okay? If we do other way, then we are going to duplicate the primary key from payments into orders. So in that sense, in that case, I'm going to create another column inside the payments inside the order table, which is payment ID, and the payment ID is a foreign key here. Okay, so duplicating payments into the orders, and then is that required? Now look at here, the receiving side, which is order side, is dashed. Okay, so therefore this is optional. You see that? Just say for the same one-to-one relationship, if you do in different side, the foreign key can be optional. But that makes sense. Okay, so for example, orders may or may not have payments, right? So if you have an order record, you may have no payment. So payment ID may be missing, may be optional, right? So maybe some payments, some orders like just free orders, right? So there's no need for payment. Okay, so we will do either way, but not both. So I am going to say if I do that way, I will duplicate that like that. So basically this PID duplicate into here. All right. So the whole thing, say this is what we just did. We created 4 tables. Actually, now we have 5 tables, including the junction table in the middle here. Okay, junction table, the products table, and the orders table, customer table, and the payments table. So 5 tables. So this diagram, if you show this, relationship between primary key and the foreign key relationship, this diagram is called a Bachman diagram. Remember Bachman? Okay, he was the person invented a network model to begin with. Okay, network database model was invented by Charles Bachman. Okay, so this is the Bachman diagram. All right, so I'm going to pause for a second to see whether anybody has questions at this point. So this is the model. This is a relational model that converted from the ERD, which is, I just show you. And then for your example, for your homework, you basically just create something like that. You can just hand drawn all these tables, just like what I did here, and then take a picture, submit a picture to eCourse. Does everybody hear what I said? Okay, sometimes I have, when I say something, I repeat it, and then after the class, I still have student questions asking, how am I going to submit my homework? Where can I find my homework? Okay, so just make sure you pay attention, listen to what I said, what I see, and also especially since I repeated. Any questions? Is everything clear? Yes or no?
Yep.
Yes.
It's clear.
Okay, all right, so now let's, okay, so what am I going to do next? I will use another example or do another example. I'm going to just use the same whiteboard to continue. Okay, so let's use PowerPoint. Look at the PowerPoint. I'm going to find the example. I think it was here. Okay, so this example is too tiny. Let me see whether I can make it bigger. Can you see better? So it has student who does checkout. No, this is not a weak entity here. This is just there's no little bar here. This little bar should not be there. I think I made a mistake here. So let's see if I go back to here. Okay, so this is not identifying. Okay, and then let me do it again. into sleeping two again.
Call from 14407912543.
Okay. Sleeping
Call
two.
from 1440791.
Okay, so now let me go back to the PowerPoint and then replace this one. Control V again. Okay, so now let's change this back. I think this one. Okay. ER diagrams. Now, can you see it? I just made it small. The word is still small. Okay, let me just make it bigger. Can you see better? Can you see my screen? Student, checkout, book copy, and the book. Right, so basically we have 4 entities again. So the first thing we want to do is we will create one table for each. So let's create a second example. So let's say this library check out example. Okay, so we have 4 tables to begin with. Students. Okay. Student has student ID and the student major, I think. Okay, so you can just look at the diagram again. Student major. Major is optional. Student ID is required. So student ID is ID, so make the primary key on the line, and the major is optional. Okay, so point is trying to explain how we do the relationships. So I do not put a lot of attributes in here. And then we have a table called check out. So check out. So checkout has 2 columns also. Customize, what is it called? Transaction ID and also checkout date. So transaction ID, which is ID, and checkout date, which is required. Okay, so that will be second table. The third table is a book and is a book. So let's just do the book first. So I'm going to just do book here. Books. So books have ISBN number, that is ID, and then a title, which is required. Okay. And also publish year. There's one more here. Publish, let's say pub year. Okay. And the publish year is optional. So let's put optional here. And finally, book copy. Book copy has copy number and condition. Condition is optional. So book copies with copy number. Okay. And then copy number and the conditions. Condition, which is optional. Okay, so that's basically according to the 4th rule, everything is common sense, right? Everything is common sense. Okay, and now let's handle relationships. So for when you handle relationships, we have weak entities. Let's do weak entities first, okay? Because you will see that why we do that. Because weak relationship, weak entities, that's for weak entities, that does not have a primary UID by itself. Okay, so we have to handle this weak entity first. Okay, so how do we do weak entities? So first of all, you have one-to-many. You will do that as usual. Okay, so one-to-many between book and the book copies is one-to-many. So you are going to duplicate ISBN number as a foreign key from books into here. Okay, so from book ISBN number, because book is one side, right? And this is many side, so you're going to duplicate that. Okay, and then this foreign key. Look at the foreign key. If you look at the diagram here, this is a solid line. So receiving side is solid. So of course we'll have to make that as required. So there's one indication that should be required. The second indication actually for this weak entity, you do not need to think. Actually, you have to make it as required. Why? Because this foreign key will have to be part of a primary key for this table, for the book copies table, for the weak entity. Because this, you look at this little bar here, this little bar here just indicate that this table will get primary key from here as a part of a primary key for itself. So book copies is weak entity, depends on the strong entity, books to exist. So therefore, you don't have to rely on books to provide part of a primary key for it to be identified. Let me give you, just to make sense that I think we explained that. Okay, so I'm going to repeat that again. So library book copy number, like copy 1, copy 2, copy 3, right? So those 1, 2, 3, they are not uniquely identify each copy. Okay, so for example, if you have a book called Business Database Management, and that has maybe copy 1, copy 2, copy 3. Now, if you have a programming class, another programming book, and the programming book may also have book copy 1, copy 2, copy 3. So those 1, 2, 3 cannot uniquely identify each copy. However, if you know which book, and then the book copy number together, you will be able to identify the book copies, right? So database management, the title, the book copy 1, you specify that particular copy, right? Copy 2, specify a different copy, right? So that's why the weak entity has to depends on the strong entity to provide a part of a primary key. So that's what we do. This is what we do. So the only thing difference is we make sure we not only make that as required, but also that the foreign key must be also part of a primary key. So now, what is the primary key for book copies? Primary key for book copies is going to consist of 2 columns, customer ID and ISBN number together. That's composite primary key. Make sense? Anybody has a question? All right, so we are pretty much done. So now let's do one more. Okay, so let's say we have many-to-many relationship. Oh, we're out of time. Sorry. Okay.
There is nothing for me to resume.
What's going on here? So let me just do quickly. Okay, let's do like 1 more minute. So finish this many-to-many relationship between checkout and book copies. Okay, between checkout and book copies. So we are going to create a junction table because of many-to-many relationship. Okay, so we can just name that as check out book copies. Okay, so name that, or maybe just like call that a transaction line. So if we don't do that, then we can say this is check out lines. Okay, so you're going to duplicate primary key from checkout, which is transaction ID as foreign key. And then you're going to duplicate primary key from book copies. Remember, book copies has 2 columns, as book copies has as a copy number and also ISBN number. So you have to duplicate both. So copy number and ISBN number. And then you have to make sure that both are together as one foreign key. So in other words, this junction table still have 2 foreign keys, okay? And then 1 foreign key just transaction ID, second foreign key consists of both columns because that's 1 primary key duplicated here is 1 foreign key. And all foreign keys will be required and all foreign keys will work together to make one primary key. Okay, so therefore, this table is going to have like 3 columns as a primary key, composite primary key. Sorry, I take extra 2 minutes, 3 minutes. So let me stop here to see whether anybody has questions. No questions? Okay, so I will see you next Wednesday, everyone. And I'm going to save this screenshot.
Professor, I actually have a question.
Yeah.
It's about our homework. So how do we implement the relational model